The first thing I remember is the sound of bone snapping. It was sharp, like a twig breaking underfoot in a quiet forest, but so much closer, too intimate, too personal. That sound came from inside me from my right arm. And it was followed by a pain so vivid, so primal, that it briefly drowned out everything else. The concrete beneath me, the distant engine rumbling in the parking garage, the glint of polished shoes approaching with calculated calm. I didn't scream. I just clenched my teeth and breathed through my nose like they taught us in Quantico. Pain is temporary. The mission is not. A pair of heels clicked on the concrete. That sound, measured, confident, familiar, cut through the haze. I knew that walk. I had memorized every nuance of that gait over 3 years of supposed partnership. The rhythm used to mean safety, home, routine. Now it sounded like death. She stepped into view, silhouetted against the garage floodlight. Raven black hair, perfectly pressed blazer, those dark, unreadable eyes. Cassandra. My wife. My handler. My betrayer. I warned you, Alex, she said coldly. You were getting too close. She didn't flinch as she watched me struggle to rise with one arm hanging limp and useless. She didn't kneel beside me or even pretend to care. Was it ever real? I croaked. Cassandra's lips twitched, not into a smile, but something crueler. It was real enough to fool you. That was the assignment. Then she turned her back on me. I watched her walk away with Julian Krell, the head of private security for Stratus Biogen. She didn't look back. Not once. Rewind, 48 hours earlier. My name is Alex Mercer. I'm a forensic accountant embedded with the Bureau's Corporate Crimes Division. For 3 years, I was deep cover inside Stratus Biogen, a company whose public face was cutting-edge pharmaceuticals and sleek investor presentations, but whose shadowed corridors reeked of buried bodies and doctored data. I didn't go in alone. I had backup, handlers, a mission brief. What I didn't expect was Cassandra Ward, the woman who became both my wife and my blind spot. She was brought in as a clinical research liaison. She had access to everything: trial protocols, overseas expenditure, internal memos marked classified. She was perfect. I vouched for her. I convinced my handler, Special Agent Nora Halden, to fold Cassandra into our operation. She can help, I said. She knows the science better than we ever will. God help me, I even believed it. The truth began to unravel with a single email, a flagged travel expense buried in the corporate system tied to a facility in Singapore that supposedly hadn't existed since 2021. When I tried to pull the access logs, I found they'd already been archived by Cassandra. She had overwritten them 6 hours before I started looking. That's when I began to dig in earnest. And that's when the photos started showing up. The first was from a surveillance asset I had stationed outside the Vectra Hotel downtown. A grainy nighttime image. Cassandra stepping out of a black SUV. Not in her usual business attire, but in a slate gray dress I'd never seen before. On her arm, Kellen Voss, CEO of Stratus Biogen, a man we were actively trying to indict. I stared at that image until my knuckles turned white. The timestamp was from the same night she claimed she'd been on a red-eye to a biotech summit in Denver. The second image was worse, them at the rooftop bar. Laughing. Leaning in. Her hand on his. Her wedding ring catching the light. I didn't need a third. But I got one anyway. The hotel elevator. His hand on the small of her back. Her ID badge clipped to her purse. That night, I sat in my home office for hours. The screens glowed around me like silent judges. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I stared at the wall and tried to make sense of the wreckage that used to be my life. When I walked into the Boston field office at 3:41 a.m., I was no longer a husband. I was an operative on a compromised mission. Special Agent Nora Halden stood waiting, her hair pulled back, the shadows under her eyes deeper than usual. She didn't say anything as she unlocked the secure room. She just handed me a file, thick, worn, and dangerously heavy with truth. Start with page 3, she said. You're not going to like any of it, but that one hurts the most. I opened it. Access logs. Communications metadata. Flight records. Financial transfers from shell corporations routed through Singapore, Estonia, Cyprus. All of it tied to Cassandra. She's been moving data off-site, Nora said. Personnel files. Financials. Trial records from facilities in Asia and Central America. Most of it encrypted, but not all. And some of those files belong to people who disappeared shortly after raising ethical concerns. Whistleblowers. She told me it was stress, I muttered. She told you a lot of things. I stared at the evidence. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. There was too much blood in the paper. Too much of my own failure. And then came the kicker. She met Voss a year before she met you. Nora said almost gently. I looked up. That's impossible. We met in Chicago at… Yeah, she interrupted, sliding over another photo. She was already at a different conference in Toronto 6 months prior. Same hotel, same man, same ring on her right hand. I froze. Alex, Nora said, her voice sharp now. We believe Cassandra was part of this before you ever shook her hand. Before she ever spilled that coffee on your shirt and played the charming scientist. My mind began to replay everything. The so-called random encounters. The inside jokes. Her knowing when to be quiet and when to push. She'd mirrored me perfectly. Too perfectly. I thought I was choosing her, I said, more to myself than anyone. But I was the one being chosen. We all were, Nora replied. This was never about romance. It was about control. About access. She played the long game. And then the final knife. We believe she's prepping to run. I snapped my gaze to her. Run where? Unknown. But Voss just filed a flight plan. Private airfield. International destination. No extradition. I stood so fast the chair clattered behind me. My broken arm screamed in protest. But I didn't care. We stop her. Tonight. Nora hesitated. Alex, you're not in any condition. She broke my arm, I growled. She broke everything. There was a long silence. Then Nora nodded. We do it smart. You want her, fine. But we need her with the files. We need to catch the transfer on camera. That's what makes this bulletproof. Understood? I said, my voice cold and measured. She handed me a secure phone. Your lead on this. But don't let it get personal. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because it already was. Scene shift. Cassandra. Cassandra Ward. Private message. Intercepted. To Kellen Voss. Subject. Phoenix Protocol. Confirmed. Data packages verified. Clean IDs acquired. 3 a.m. departure. Mercer's wounded but still active. He knows too much. We won't get another clean window after this. She signed the message with a codename I'd never seen before. Virga. I stared at the screen. Not Cassandra. Not even Cassie. Virga. Just another mask she wore, one of many. And I realized then maybe there never was a Cassandra Ward. Maybe I had loved a ghost. I watched her pack the briefcase through the lens of a fiber-optic camera, coiled through the ceiling vent of her office. Gloved hands. Deliberate movements. A practiced rhythm that didn't belong to a panicked woman about to betray a multinational pharmaceutical empire. No, this wasn't fear. This was routine. She didn't even hesitate when she slid the encrypted hard drives into their padded slots, nor when she removed a sealed envelope marked with a crimson sigil I'd never seen before. One, even Nora couldn't identify. This wasn't just corporate espionage anymore. This was geopolitical. We were hours from losing everything. By 8 p.m., the command center in the warehouse outside Worcester was humming with quiet intensity. Tactical maps, heat scans, infrared footage, chatter from embedded agents. Felt like a war room because it was. Nora stood at the head of it all, a finger pressed to her comm as she issued orders. Team Alpha, eyes on the hangar. Team Delta, confirm visual on the perimeter security. I stood to the side, my arm in a tactical sling, staring at the same floor plan for the 100th time. The private airstrip where Kellen Voss's jet was being prepped was nestled between woodland and coastline. No formal tower, no FAA oversight. It was the perfect place to vanish unless we got it right. Judith Kane arrived just after sunset. The assistant turned informant, who had quietly recorded every shady move made by Cassandra and Voss for over a year. She looked pale, like she hadn't slept in days. But when she met my eyes, I saw fire there too. She's not bluffing, Judith said. She has everything: field names, locations of offshore black sites, aliases, wire routes, whistleblower lists, and she's going to trade it all for safety. Who's the buyer? I asked. We still don't know, Nora cut in. Encrypted comms routed through servers in Ukraine and Paraguay. Our best guess? A state actor. Someone with enough reach to disappear her forever. Then we don't let her leave the ground. 0:37 a.m. Field briefing. The final tactical rundown felt surreal. I stood before a group of black-clad agents. Some I'd worked with for years. Others pulled in for this mission alone. Every face carried the weight of what we were about to do. This isn't just about stopping a data breach, I told them. This is about making sure no one ever uses people the way Stratus did. Whistleblowers were tortured, vanished. Trial data was falsified. People died. I looked around the room. I trusted the wrong person. That's on me. But tonight, I fix it. There were no cheers, no applause, just nods. Everyone here knew what this meant. 1:12 a.m. Infiltration. I rode in with Team Echo unmarked SUV, comms hot, drone support overhead. The forest surrounding the airstrip was eerily quiet, save for the low hum of insects and the distant swell of waves. Through night vision goggles, I watched Voss's jet on the tarmac. Ground crew moved quickly, efficiently. Too efficiently. That's when I saw them, armed guards in black suits with no insignia, communicating via hand signals. Nora's voice crackled in my earpiece. Confirmed. Voss has brought in outside security. Not Meridian. Possibly foreign contractors. This is bigger than expected. Of course it was. Because Cassandra never did anything small. 1:47 a.m. The approach. I crawled the last 10 meters on my stomach. The pine needles pressing into my sling and the damp soil soaking my clothes. From the treeline I saw her arrive. Cassandra stepped out of a black Range Rover in a cream blazer and heels. Her face was calm, serene, like she was arriving at a fundraiser, not at the end of a criminal empire built on human lives. Voss exited after her, holding his own briefcase, and they moved toward the base of the jet stairs. A table had been set up. The trade point, this was it. Visual confirmation of both targets, I whispered. Briefcases in hand. Repeat, both in hand. Then I saw him, Spencer Krell, Stratus's former head of Asia-Pacific operations, flanked by Julian Krell, the man who shattered my arm. The same man I intended to return the favor to, if I made it that far. 2:18 a.m. The signal. The moment came in silence. Nora's voice was a whisper. Stand by. They're opening the cases. Confirm content transfer. Now. Through the scope, I saw Cassandra unlatch the briefcase. Neatly stacked hard drives, paper files, USB sticks, a leather-bound logbook. She was giving them everything. Voss leaned in to inspect it, then passed her a packet. Swiss passports, travel documents, money, and a sleek black device I didn't recognize. I pressed the mic. This is Mercer, confirming full exchange in progress. Recommend action now. Nora didn't wait. Go, go, go. 2:21 a.m. The breach. The woods erupted in laser sights and shouts. FBI. Hands in the air. Down on the ground. Do it now. Flashbangs cracked the air, throwing silhouettes into chaos. Armed guards drew weapons, but were instantly lit up by red dots on their foreheads. Cassandra didn't move. She simply turned, calm, composed, and scanned the tree line. Her eyes found me instantly, and she smiled. You always were predictable, Alex, she called out. I stepped into the open, heart thundering. Yeah? Well, this time I brought friends. Behind me, Judith emerged from cover with an agent at her side. She held up a thumb drive. Full evidence chain. Time-stamped, duplicated, secure cloud backup already uploaded. Voss cursed and lunged for the jet. Too late. Leon Tran, our embedded agent in the cockpit, stepped into view wearing full tactical gear. Going somewhere, Kellen? The billionaire froze. The game was over. They read her rights under the roar of jet engines and the scream of floodlights. Cassandra stood perfectly still, wrists bound behind her, blazer streaked with dust from the tarmac. She didn't look at me as they led her away. Not at first. But just before she stepped into the armored transport, she turned. And in that half-second, we saw each other. Not as agents, not as enemies, as the two people who had once pretended to be in love and maybe in some warped, broken version of reality were. I did love you, you know, she said quietly. I don't believe you, I replied, but I wasn't sure if I meant it. 2 days later, the case dominated every major news outlet. Stratus Biogen executives arrested in global cover-up. FBI uncovers years of human trial abuse and disappearances. Informant Virga, identified as CEO's mistress, an FBI agent's wife. My face was never shown. My name never mentioned. Officially, I was just another source familiar with the operation. But internally, the Bureau knew exactly what it had cost. Years undercover. Broken agents. Broken bodies. A broken marriage. I was offered commendations. A medal. I declined. The survivors. Nora met me at the Bureau's safe house a week later. We stood in the courtyard, watching a group of rescued whistleblowers reunite with their families. Scarred, shaken, but alive. Michael, my former research assistant, limped toward me with tears in his eyes. He'd been held in a remote lab in southern China, drugged and interrogated for months. You got me out, he whispered. You didn't give up. Never crossed my mind. I lied. He hugged me anyway. Cassandra's deal. She tried, of course. She offered testimony, documents, bank routes. She begged. But Judith's files were too strong, too detailed. She had receipts, recordings, passwords. And Cassandra? She had nothing left to trade. The court gave her 27 years without parole. Voss got 30. Krell flipped and shaved his sentence, but he'll never walk a street without a tail again. Their empire crumbled overnight. Stratus was sold, dismantled. Its assets frozen, its research now part of a federal task force rebuilding ethical biotech from the ruins. I sat in the back row of the courtroom when the sentence was read. She didn't look for me. This time, I didn't look for her either. 6 months later. Cooper and Kane Consulting. That's the name on the frosted glass of our new downtown Boston office. Judith runs operations. I handle field work. Together, we protect whistleblowers. We trace dark money. We fix what companies like Stratus tried to bury. My arm still aches in the cold. Some nights, I still hear the echo of Cassandra's heels on that concrete floor. But it's fading. Nora visits sometimes. She's deputy director now. Still fights from the inside. I fight from the outside. Same war. Different battlefield. 1 year later, the last visit. I didn't plan to go. But when the letter came, her handwriting unmistakable, I booked a flight to California. Federal Correctional Institution, Dublin. Maximum security. Cassandra sat across from me in khaki, no makeup, her hair streaked silver. You look different, she said. So do you. There was a silence between us that belonged to ghosts. I wasn't supposed to fall for you, she said. I waited. But I did. Somewhere in the middle of the lie, something real snuck in. Too late, I said. I know. She slid a note across the table. Names. Numbers. Locations. Others are still out there, she said. People worse than me. You want to stop them? Start here. I pocketed it without replying. When I stood to leave, she didn't ask for forgiveness. That was the only honest thing she'd ever done. Now, sometimes people ask me how I survived it, how I loved someone who turned out to be the very thing I'd sworn to fight. I never have a good answer. Except this. Sometimes the break has to happen before you can rebuild. Sometimes you need to lose everything you thought was real to find what actually is. And when the fracture heals, it heals stronger. Even if it leaves a scar.